Dear kindly Sergeant Krupke, you got to understand, it's just our bringing upkeep that gets us out of hand. Our mothers all are junkies, our fathers all are drunks. Golly, Moses, naturally we're punks. Sheer genius. Really? And I have dined out on those lines for decades because I am interested in human nature. I believe that genes matter. And the response that I sometimes get is, well, if you attribute emotion and behavior to genes, isn't that a way of evading responsibility? Aren't you just opening the door for miscreants to say, well, it's not my fault, I was born that way, it's just my genes? And I always say, well, no, that could go either way. And then I provide the lyrics to Dear Officer Krupke. Mm-hmm. So I've always, you wrote those lyrics in the 1957?
1956 is when I wrote them.
56, well ahead of the heyday of environmental explanations of everything. And so I've always been curious what was the background to what made you come up with that idea and
You're
those
going
words.
To be so disappointed. Arthur Lawrence read a book called The Last Angry Man, and we were looking for something for the gang to do in the middle of the second act that would be comic, but would still be part of the melodrama of the story, but on the Shakespearean drunken porter principle, which is in the middle of a lot of drama, put in some low comedy, and then everybody likes the drama better. And there was a scene in the novel in which a group of delinquents were in front of a judge, and they just kept saying to the judge, "I apologize, Judge, you're so right." And they just schmeicheled him. That's a word of my people. And Arthur said, "You know, that might be the attitude." I said, "Yeah, that's a good idea." So it really comes from his first name. I think Gerald Green was the name of the novelist, and it really comes from him. It's not my idea.
Okay. And the character's name was Krupke. That was
No, that's a whole other thing. No. Krupke, Arthur named him Krupke, which was a wonderful name to deal with in a song, of course. That was in itself funny. So,
Gee, Officer Krupke, Krupp you.
Yep.
That's how it ends.
Well,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Want to know how that came about?
Yes, please.
I wanted to be, some of you may have heard this, I wanted to be the first Broadway songwriter to say fuck you on the stage. There had been Cat in a Hot Tin Roof in which Burl Ives had said bullshit, which was the canon that was heard around the world. Nobody ever used that word before on the stage, at least not on the commercial stage in New York City. And so I wanted to be the first one to say fuck you. When we auditioned the score for Goddard Lieberson, who was president of Columbia Records and who was a great friend of Lenny's, he said, "It's very good. The problem is that if you use that, we cannot ship the record over the state line.
Oh.
And therefore, we will have no distribution for the recording of West Side Story if you use that." And so I don't know, and it was Lenny who came up with Krupp You.
Oh.
And it was a brilliant solution, of course, because there is no other four-letter word in the script. And by using that, it would have been a shock for shock's sake.
Yeah.
Nobody said that, and nobody thought that, but I realized it later, that of course, it's much better to have a silly word than a four-letter word, because this was not a shock. When we did the revival, this last revival a few years ago, Arthur Lawrence wanted to make it, quote, tough and contemporary, and so I started with his approval and in fact, not his idea, but the notion, I started to, instead of Mother Lovin' Street, you can imagine what I said, and Krupp You instead of that, and of course, it didn't belong in the script at all, because the rest of the script is written in idealized language. So it all became ridiculous, and I realized it was entirely wrong. And even, I was aware of it when I was writing things like Golly Moses. They're making fun of swear words, but it saves me the problem of putting swear words into their mouths. So that's how Krupp You came about.
Well, they did you a favor, because Krupp You is funnier.
Much better.
It's wittier.
Much better.
Well, an earlier version of that slippage in time was when Pygmalion was first performed on the British stage. and it has that famous scene where Eliza Doolittle is at a upper-class tea party, and she has been feigning this upper-class accent that Henry Higgins has been teaching her. And the hilarity comes when she's asked if she's going to walk across the park, and she says, "Not bloody likely, I'm going to take a taxi." Which at the time, well, it was a clever bit of life and art working in parallel, because it was meant to shock the people at the tea party, but it shocked the audiences at the time.
Sure.
Then, because taboo words of one generation can become unexceptionable to another one, to the next one, when it was turned into My Fair Lady, they realized that the audience would not be shocked, and so they had to come up with something that would be at least plausibly shocking to an audience of, I guess it was the early 1950s. Mm-hmm. And so then that Eliza at the Ascot races saying, "Move your bloomin' arse." Mm-hmm. And that was just shocking enough so that at least the audience would get the point that this was meant to be shocking, because otherwise bloody was no longer...
Well, you know, I grew up on movies, and particularly British movies. I had no idea that bloody was a dirty word, an unforbidden word. It just sounds like, you know, it has no weight in America. It doesn't. I don't think anybody in America understands that word is the equivalent of the 7-letter word beginning with F.
Yeah.
Nobody understands that.
No longer, I mean...
No, but in those days.
In those days,
yeah,
yes.
Exactly. I just thought, what's everybody so shocked about?
Right, yeah. This is sometimes called the great Australian adjective. So lyrics. Since then, you have always written both the music and the lyrics. But
Not since. I also only wrote lyrics for Gypsy. Since then.
Okay. So putting words...
And Do I Hear a Waltz? There are 3 shows I wrote.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway.
So putting words to music. So language has a metrical structure. It's got a rhythm. And music does too, but they're not the same. They obviously can be aligned, and you wince when a lazy lyricist doesn't get the stress of the musical beat aligned with the stress.
I wince, most people don't.
I mean, do you, having carried out this task, do you get any sense of what the differences are between musical meter and linguistic meter?
Well, first of all, the thing that's always struck me is that music of any country is a reflection of the language. I like to think that if I heard a piece of music and that I'd never heard before, I could tell you whether it was German, French, English, Spanish, or Russian. They have such distinct rhythms and such distinct inflective melodic outlines, and not to mention the harmonies, so that music itself is already, whatever music you're writing to, is already part of your country. Now, if you're writing a show that takes place in France, then you have to flavor it that way. But if you're talking about just the relationship between music and lyrics, you know, my answer is always, if you're writing a dramatic piece and you're writing a song, and you have a character that you know, then you get into the character and you start writing the inflections that the character would write as music, that the character would write as music. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's a thing Steve Reich has, you know, glommed onto, which is some of his music is direct reflection of the inflection. And that is always, I think, what counts when you're writing for the stage. So that the songs, if you're writing a dramatic piece, there are other kinds of musicals, but if you're writing a piece in which the songs are supposed to carry on the function of the dialogue and the story, then what you do is you imitate the inflection of the character, and that gives you your melodic notion. Now, obviously, then you do some extensions, you do augmentations, you do diminution, you do all kinds of things with that melodic line, but it's actually just reflecting the way we talk. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as you listen to me right now, I'm singing. It's just, I'm not singing with the tones. I'm singing up and down and pausing and putting accents on certain words and pick them and rushing here and then slowing down there. So, you know, it's actually very simple in its. No, it is not easy. I didn't say that. It's simple.
Yeah.
Difference.
Now, the art form of musical theater, which has characters breaking out into song. The lyrics that they sing generally are not always that conversational, especially in the
It depends on the style.
Depends on the style. But there was I think you represent a tradition of finely crafted, witty, ingenious, clever lyrics of the Cole Porter, Lawrence Hart, Oscar Hammerstein, your teacher, Ira Gershwin, which in the music that my generation kind of switched to, like rock music, just lost that whole tradition of writing lyrics with a thesaurus and a rhyming dictionary and with clever offbeat rhymes. Even the best popular lyricists now don't have that kind of finely crafted linguistic structure. And you clearly didn't go with the rock movement.
But wait a minute, we're talking about two different kinds of songwriting. There's concert songwriting and there's dramatic songwriting. If you're talking about rock, let's say, there are very few rock musicals that attempt to tell a story. Rent was, famous because it was maybe Hair, but Hair didn't really try to tell a story. It was a set of, like a review. But Rent tried to tell a story through with this guy. So it's an entirely different way of approaching music. Yeah. The other thing that most contemporary music is not, pop music is not interested in is harmony, which is the thing that interests me the most. So what rock is about is visceral effects, dance. It's about sonic effects. It's very much about instrumentation.
Production.
It's about, exactly, and that's the
In fact, this morning, Sir George Martin passed away, the Beatles producer, so much responsible for the acoustic experimentation that made the Beatles music so distinctive.
It's very much about noise. It's very much about community activity, So I think we're talking about, forgive me, apples and oranges. We're just talking about different approaches to what is going on to an audience, what is being conveyed. If it's a story, then the lyrics tend to, even rock, tend to go look at Hamilton, which is rap, but it's not just rap, it's rap about the story. And so it's all about, stage is about telling a story, if you go to a jukebox musical, of course, that's not what it's about, but that's not what we're talking about. So I think it's a natural development. The first, as I've said before, the first rap that was done on the stage, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is the opening number of Music Man, which is rap. But it's not only rap, it's a rap that makes a train, that tells you all the exposition, that introduces the character. It's a dazzling piece, but it's in service of telling a story. It isn't just making it isn't that? It's telling a story. That's what counts.
Well, and speaking of My Fair Lady, we also had Rex Harrison kind of talking on pitch. Why can't a woman be more like a man?
Well, that's because he couldn't sing. And it was a wonderful solution.
It was a wonderful solution.
Wonderful solution. Yeah, absolutely. It's But you talk about rhymes, and that I've always believed that if a song is heavily rhymed, it reflects the intellect of the character. Now if you're doing a style piece, if you're doing something like the fairy tales we did, that's a different matter. But if you're trying to tell a story about any kind of contemporary, it's that to rhyme a lot, what you call brilliant or dazzling, that reflects the attitude of the character. And Oscar never did that, and so you included him with Cole Porter and Ira Gershwin. It's quite different. Oscar was all about storytelling. His lyrics, many people who dislike his lyrics, they dislike it because it's only so seemingly so plain. It's it's deceptive simplicity, of course, but nevertheless the effect. When he tried to do rhymes, you have to turn your head away. It was really not, he was just, that wasn't what interested him, and therefore he wasn't very good at it. What he was good at was emotion and exploring a character, telling a story, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas Cole Porter was not the least bit interested in the story. He was interested in the song. And certainly same thing is true of Ira Gershwin or Larry Hart or any of those people. Because that was in the 1930s, that's what musicals were. Oscar came along and said, hey, we could also tell a story with song. Oh, they all said. And he did.
Yeah, I mean, I miss the wit, the cleverness, the ingenuity
A lot of people
that went into lyrics during that golden age.
Yeah, well,
And
yes, but then a lot of those songs, you can feel the strain of the author trying to fit the words in. Oh God, oh God, I need another rhyme for orange. Well, am I going to use it?
Right.
And that's my feeling about a number of people. If I mentioned any names, I'd be booed from the audience. But I'm a big Cole Porter fan.
Yeah, me too. Well, rhyme, just to go off in a slightly different direction, the phenomenon, rhyme is one of the things that even in rock music and pop music is almost mandatory, that even if there isn't the same kind of cleverness, the lines at least try to rhyme. And in the case of hip-hop and rap music, there's a lot of rhyme, a lot of internal rhyme. So that's
a lot of the function of rhyme is to define the musical phrase, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. The musical phrase goes dum-ba-da-ba-dum, bum-ba-da-ba-dum. So by putting a rhyme at the end of each of those, you've pointed out the similarity of the rhythm, or the non-similarity, if that's what you want to do. And one of the things that's kind of fun when you're writing songs is to try to surprise an audience and say, you think there's going to be a rhyme, but actually there isn't. And that gives us some, because if otherwise you tend, it's an easy trap to fall into, forms of doggerel. And that eventually bores the ear. Yeah. And then the audience stops listening, and once they stop listening, you might as well go home.
Well, rhyme has, changing to my interest in the structure of language, the fact that rhyme tickles the ear is itself a bit of a puzzle. And because I think it's more than just a convention of doggerel or Western music, but there seems to be a feature of language that if you break words up into the units of the kind that linguists would write down on paper when trying to explain what gives rise to the sound pattern of a language, there's something about the way language is represented in the mind, that we break words up into those units, and they tend to organize the way we store words in memory. And this was made clear to me when I started to study irregular forms in language, irregular verbs, which there are about 165 of them in English. They are, by definition, unpredictable. That's why we call them irregular, because you've got to remember them. But they fall into families that often rhyme. So you've got fling, flung, cling, clung, ring, rung. You've got bear, bore, wear, wore, tear, tore, swear, swore. You've got feel, felt, kneel, knelt. They're not always perfect rhymes. You also have kneel, knelt, dream, dreamt, keep, kept.
Well, but some people say dreamed and some people say dreamt. I mean,
exactly. Some people say,
but nobody says exam.
Oh, right. Yes. Dizzy Dean, the pitcher and then radio announcer, once narrated a game in which he said he was about to catch the fly ball, but his eyes were bound by the sun, so he dropped it. So there is some creativity that goes on. These aren't completely, and then people may have wordplay like we're having a party and spice are welcome, namely plural spouse. So one puzzle is why no one ever, except for me, no one ever reads lists of irregular verbs in sequence.
Wait, you read them or you make them, or you make them up yourself? I mean, you think there's no such thing as looking up a list of all the irregular verbs.
Oh, yes, there is. I do it.
Well,
yes, I put one together.
Compile it.
I compiled it.
That's
yes.
my point.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I compiled a list, and they fall into all of these rhymes and sing, sang, and ring, rang, and then drink, drank. Not exactly a rhyme. There's another phenomenon where we're all natural poets. That is, we use the standard devices of poetry in ordinary speech without trying to be poetic, and that's in truncated profanities. So for every taboo word, there is a whole family of similar words that you could imagine, a vicar or a maiden aunt might blurt out if they stub their toe and they just can't think of uttering a swear word. So for God, we have gosh and golly and gadzooks. For Jesus, we've got geez, gee willikers, Jiminy cricket, jeepers creepers, For Christ, we've got, crikey. For
You
shit,
got
we have
cripes.
sheesh.
Cripes is my favorite word.
Cripes. So all of them are, a lot of them are alliterative. Some of them rhyme, like son of a gun instead of son of a bitch, or in French, sacre bleu instead of sacre Dieu. And some of them preserve meter, neither the alliteration nor the rhyme. And my favorite example are words for insincerity that are not bullshit. So you've got balderdash, flapdoodle, blatherskite, horse feathers, applesauce, all of the words that people substitute. They don't rhyme, they don't alliterate, but they preserve that metrical structure of two stressed monosyllables or trochees. So there's something about the
rhythm of those.
The rhythm of those that, and people recognize the similarity. So you say even if you never heard the word blatherskite, if you say that's blatherskite, you just recognize the similarity.
To blather, and everybody sort of.
Well, now everyone knows blather. Yeah.
But these words you're talking about, nobody uses them anymore. They haven't been used in 100 years.
Well, that's because our creativity is no longer challenged because we can blurt out the taboo words. We don't have to substitute a polite synonym. But and it's true in other languages too. In Quebecois French, the worst thing that you can say is, or one of the worst things is tabernacle. The swearing is religious. Colles, chalice. But there are truncated profanities for those too. So you say tabarnouche, which doesn't mean anything. But it's what you can say if you're emotionally in public, yeah. And then even in longer units, you have in one of the principles of rhetoric is again repeating an abstract structure, even if you don't repeat the content of repetition and parallelism in spellbinding oratory and rhetoric. I have a dream, and then you repeat, I have a dream, or
what is the literary term for that? When you do that, there's a one of those.
It's one of those fancy Greek terms.
Yeah, I love those words. Yeah, but
those rhetorical devices.
All right.
I mean, the boring academic term is structural parallelism, not nearly as nice as whatever the Greek word is that both of us are forgetting. But there's something about repeating a unit of language, whether it is a rhyme in the R-I-M-E sense, that is the vowel and the final consonants, repeating an onset, then you get alliteration, repeating a metrical structure, repeating a sentence structure that just pleases the brain, and we recognize that abstract repeated structure, even if all of the content has been swapped out.
Yes, but it's necessary. Patterns are necessary.
Yeah.
Visual patterns, same way. The reason you have to do 2 or 3 of them is because you don't know that that's a table until you see, 2 tables. I mean, not everything is defined by another version of itself, but that's, when you talk about comforting the brain, that's how we recognize things, isn't it? So that's exactly what a rhyme does. It helps you recognize whatever it is you're trying to think. If there's no rhyme, then it's just hanging out there in the desert, So it seems to me natural that the brain should do that with words the way it does it with visual objects or people.
Yeah. Slightly different topic, emotion and music. So there is another kind of puzzle for someone interested just in how the mind works. First of all, why particular chord changes, melodies would evoke emotion, but actually they don't really evoke emotion in the sense that when you hear a sad song, you're not really sad.
Wait a minute, don't talk just about songs. Let's talk about music, not songs.
Okay, yes, music.
As soon as you get words in, that's a whole other subject.
Forget words. Okay. So in fact, even say film scores where there's nothing to hum, there's no song, there's just strings in the background.
There's a visual image going on. Let's talk about
there is
pure music.
Yes, exactly. So, but we know that certain kinds of sounds are at least designed to evoke emotion. So if you tell me about your troubles of the day and I go kind of sarcastically, what I'm referring to is the kind of mushy strings in the tear-jerking scenes of an old Hollywood movie. So we all recognize that you can kind of orchestrate emotion with music. On the other hand, what you're evoking is a kind of bracketed or synthesized emotion, because you obviously aren't literally sad when you hear a sad song. It's deeply pleasurable. I mean, people don't pay to be saddened, but they do pay to hear sad music. So I'm just curious
Well,
as
no,
to...
but it seems to me that the premise is false. The whole idea is music, when associated with either a visual image or words or something like that, will tend to evoke whatever I mean, if you got Margaret O'Brien crying on the screen and you play a trumpet, it's going to sound like a sad trumpet, you know, particularly if you put a mute on it and put it on the other side of the stage, you know. But so but the business, I wonder if somebody would hear, I mean, whatever we think of as a sad piece of music, if a child had never seen a movie connected with that piece of music, had never heard a word connected to that piece of music, I wonder if the child would feel the emotion we're talking about. My guess is no.
I suspect it's maybe somewhat, because you can certainly see some kinds of parallels between the kind of emotion that a piece of music is intended to evoke and properties of the music, whether it is legato or rapidly paced, whether it's staccato or smooth.
Well, certainly
major,
legato
minor.
music would not make you want to jump up and enjoy and run around the room.
Exactly.
Whereas an allegro would, but that's not what we're talking. That's at least I don't think what you're talking about.
Or
I mean,
even,
I really believe if you played the Dying Swan for a 6-year-old, he or she would have no idea that this was supposed to be sad.
Well, I'll get one of my students
They
to
would
run the
know it would be
experiment.
slow.
Yeah.
They know it would be slow.
Yeah.
And therefore it might be slow contemplative, or it might be slow, there are so many emotions that go with evenness or slowness. There's so many emotions that go with jerkiness as well. Lively. It seems to me that I don't think music evokes an emotion per se unless it's connected with something that is specific.
That is, there would have to be some kind of almost like Pavlov-like conditioning where you see the gorgeous heroine dying,
Well,
you
that's
hear
how
the music,
that's
and
how
that's
you
how
got
you
into
learn
this.
it.
You were Pavlov into that by seeing, a couple of dying orphans and a violin playing da 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 da.
Maybe, but it may be that the first time you hear it, it naturally evokes the emotion.
Perhaps.
And that if you flip them, if you had a punk rock band while the heroine was dying, then that's a kind of association that just would not register, no matter how many trials of conditioning.
Well, it depends what kind of punk rock music you're listening to. No,
But,
the first music lesson I had at college, it was a sort of music appreciation class, and it was a teacher who really changed my life. He was so unromantic about music, which, I was brought up on movie music, and I just thought you sit at the piano in your penthouse, and you sit, and you go, da 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 da, something. But he said, I'm going to play a piece of music, and he did. 5-minute piece of music, 8-minute, and he said, okay, what does that make you think of? It's sort of dead silence. He said, well, Debussy called it La Mer. Does it sound like the sea to you? It doesn't sound like the sea to me. And that taught me a lot.
Yes, although that's somewhat different because
I
that's
know it
kind
is,
of the
but
denotation.
yes, but
Yeah,
it is
it's
connected. It's the association of a non-musical idea or feeling with a piece of abstraction, which is music. Music's abstract any way you look at it.
It is. Well, I guess it's as we say, an empirical question, and I hope I was.
Well, what about
telling-
looking at abstract art, for example? I remember that, we could look at a piece of abstract art and have entirely different reactions to it. Not about good or bad, just it made you feel, it bored you, or it made me feel excited, or whatever.
Well, although the question is all music like abstract art, or is there music? Indeed, there obviously is abstract music, especially kind of sophisticated art music of the 20th century, atonal and so on, where you have to know what the theory is to appreciate the music. But then there are also chants and lullabies and war songs and
You're talking songs.
yeah,
Lullabies,
and music,
chants,
even
war
without
songs.
the lyrics.
But
yeah.
automatically, you're
Yeah.
thinking about words. That's what's happening. And I think music is abstract. And, I think you play Beethoven's symphony. That's an abstract piece of art. Now, it can evoke many different emotions in you or me, or maybe the same ones. But as an object, I don't know if you can call it an object, it is abstract. It is its own language.
So it may not, I'm wondering if it's completely abstract. In any
Okay.
culture, I have three students, Samuel Mayer, Manveer Singh, and Luke Glowacki, who are doing a cross-cultural survey of music. They call it the Natural History of Song
Oh, yeah, you're
Project.
talking-
We were
tell
talking
them about this.
Yes,
Great.
where these three graduate students at Harvard are going to the ethnographic record in search of any recording they can get their ears on from cultures of all over the world, hunter-gatherer, pastoralists, peasants, and so on, to see what are the universals of music. A lot of people have made claims about musical universals based on two examples. So they're actually going to do the kind of the big data analysis to see actually what is universal, not just about music in general, but the contexts in which different kinds of music are used. Lullabies, war songs, love songs, healing songs, and so on, produced by men, by women, by men singing together, basically to get a survey of the distribution of music across the world's cultures. And I think it's pretty clear even at this stage in the project that you can tell a lullaby from a war chant in any culture. You don't need the lyrics. You can tell because there are natural parallels between rhythm, tempo, and tonality on the one hand, and at least certain human emotional reactions on the other. Similar to if the phenomenon of phonesthesia, phonetic symbolism in language, where a lot of experiments have shown if you give people nonsense words like maluma and takata, and then you give them some shapes, and some of them are kind of blobby, amoeboid shapes, and some of them are spiky, pointy things, and everyone agrees the spiky thing is the takata, and the blobby thing is the maluma. There's just that, or synesthesia is
But that's very related to the sound of the language, the word that you're doing, of course.
Exactly. Well, it's the sound of the language, but it is also the articulation. That is when you actually produce sounds like cantankerous, for example. No. It's not just that you've got those sharp transitions in the speech wave, but you're forcing your tongue to block the air and release it as a burst. There's something violent about the motor commands.
Which is the secret of swear words.
Yeah. With a lot of them, it's true that a lot of swear words are monosyllables that end in K.
That's right. Or T or thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they're that.
So I'm wondering if that, and that there is something natural about that. That is that there is the parallel, the abstract parallel between the violence of the motor command and what it refers to. I don't think has to be conditioned by sheer contiguity like Pavlov's bell and the food, that there is something that the brain could naturally register the parallel structure between them. And that's why I'm wondering whether some of that exists in music, where there are just some properties of the way the brain analyzes sound that makes it naturally call to mind certain emotions or certain moods.
Certainly possible. My instinct is not to believe that, but but I don't know, and obviously nobody actually knows. But this is it's certainly an interesting theory. It doesn't ring a bell with me. That's all.
Well, one of my colleagues addressed the question in a different way by seeing whether non-human animals respond to music in the same way that we do, and they clearly haven't understood any lyrics, haven't had any training in a musical idiom. But it's actually not so easy to find other mammals that respond to what we consider music.
You should see my dog when I start to play the piano.
Yeah, well,
out of the room.
Well, Adina Schachner actually did an ingenious study of her subjects were YouTube videos, because a lot of people put on YouTube videos of their cats and their dogs singing, dancing. So she did a search for cat dancing, dog dancing, horse dancing, every animal that anyone would have ever kept as a pet, combined with any version of the word dance. And she actually checked to see if the animal really was dancing in the sense of its movements being entrained to the beat of the music. And she found that not for mammals, for birds that mimic sound, that are vocal learners, the cockatiels and the cockatoos and the parrots. And in fact, if you go to YouTube and you Google or you search for dancing cockatiel, you'll get some excellent, very amusing clips. So there seems to be something about sensitivity to enough sensitivity to sound that you want to copy it yourself when you're a juvenile. That seems to have something, we don't really know what, to do with our ability to move to a rhythm.
Can you tell whether these birds are responding to the rhythm alone, or are they responding to the inflection and of, let's say, the melodic ideas or of the harmony? Can you tell what they're responding to?
So Adina was stuck with whatever was put on YouTube, at least for this study. But she did use an acoustic analyzer to find the beats. Now, the beats in recorded music obviously redundantly have the rhythm and the bass and the lyrics and so on. So just whatever that was, that's what she checked to see whether the animals were entrained to it.
It'll be interesting to see if she put on something that did not have a beat to it and see what the animals did. Or just something, let's say, starting with a single note and then gradually spreading into a harmony and then perhaps adding another layer underneath. But again, the spreading sound, it's like
whether they kind of swayed in slower
whether they would respond
time scales.
At all.
Yeah.
And if they did, what would they do? They'd probably make up lyrics.
Yes. Well, tonal music doesn't seem to, animals don't seem to particularly care about it, and which leads me to think that it has a lot to do with language.
It does, but then you think about bird calls, and you can almost always notate a bird call in diatonic language, which is really interesting to me, at least because when I was trying to do some bird stuff for, a number of shows, as a matter of fact, I really listened, I thought, they are singing in the Western scale, and I don't get it.
Really?
I wondered what Chinese birds do. But it was pretty close. Now, it may be that I'm adjusting something that isn't. I'm sure if you actually took a recording of what they're singing, nothing is on pitch related. But they're close enough so that there is a melodic idea. Now, that may be what my brain is doing to what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But I'll bet you.
Well, Peter Marler, one of the world's experts in birdsong, I asked him that question because Darwin had made that claim that birds sing according to the diatonics. And Peter was very skeptical, and he'd spent his life analyzing birdsong on spectrograms, so he was skeptical that they really did, they were on pitch. And if that's true, I don't know what the latest research on it is, it leads to the question of what is it about tonal music that tickles the ear, that is so pleasing. And the common theory, your friend Leonard Bernstein proposed it in the Unanswered Question, his Norton Lectures on Music, is that melody is serialized overtones. That is just a fact of complex harmonic sounds.
It's just the geometric progression, really.
Just the geometric progression.
But then how does he or you or anybody else explain the Eastern tonalities, which have really nothing? Those tonalities are about how you approach the note, not about where you land. It's a whole other way of thinking, and it is musical to them. That's the point. To us, it's, isn't that interesting? She's going, but to somebody listening to the kid at home is going. So I don't know about. I don't know the Norton Lectures well. I listened to them once, and I don't remember what he said about it. And he must have taken that into account because that's half the world sings that kind of music.
Yeah. Well, a common denominator seems to be just some sense of kind of tension relaxation. That there's some pitches that sound like they're departing from a repose, and then a melody will tend to kind of do its little wandering and then come back to. In our case, it'd be back to the tonic. But if there are different dissonances, then there's a progression from dissonant to more consonant.
Sure, but there's no tonic over there.
Although, yes, there are other idioms that have a pentatonic scale that is where there's some of the subset of the harmonics.
But even within the pentatonic scale, when they start making music. It's not, they're not hitting bong, nong, 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 nong. They're not doing the Hollywood Chinese, bing, 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 bing. That's not what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
And yet that's all, that's all played on the black notes. It's all bing, 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 bing. It's all black note stuff, all pentatonic, but it ain't when you get over there.
Yeah. Well, I was always impressed by the serialized overtones theory, but then someone pointed out to me that they're actually, other than our musical instruments, which are designed to have nice, pleasing harmonic sounds, most sound makers in nature actually don't give you whole number harmonics, because to get them, even the physics of sound making requires that you have basically a one-dimensional, like a string or a column of air or a pipe that's struck. And then whenever you have a two-dimensional surface, even a bell, you don't get integral harmonics, whole number multiples of the fundamental frequency. But the one resonator that we do all listen to that does give you overtones, whole number multiples of the fundamental, is the human voice, even when not singing. That we've got basically a kind of one-dimensional resonator from the pharynx to the lips, and a periodic sound generator, our larynx, the vocal folds, and that listening to a lot of speech, which all humans do, would expose you to a harmonically rich, complex sound, kind of giving the raw materials for tonal music in the idioms that do develop it.
Well, it depends on, of course, the structure of what each individual has. Some of them twang a lot more than the others, and there are non-musical speaking voices and there are musical speaking voices. I mean, one would define them as such because you hear more of the overtones in some people, and in other people you just hear sort of, I can't do it flat delivery. I'm doing it through my nose to dampen it, but that's, it has, everything gets gray,
Yeah, although, but each particular pitch that even someone like that would hit would have its own overtones.
Would have its own, yes, exactly.
Even if they don't kind of dissect them
but
and produce
it might
them
have
one
three
after
overtones
another.
as opposed to my having one or you having five. That's the thing. I suspect if you actually look at, do you call it a spectrogram? I don't know what you call it.
Spectrogram, yeah.
Spectrogram. You'd find that but you don't hear it. You hear it in some people, and you don't hear it in others. There are people who have, quote, musical voices.
Yeah.
Is there a part of the brain that's devoted to music?
Well, interesting. Prior to about 2 weeks ago, I would have said, no way, not at all, nothing, not even close. But my former colleague at MIT, Nancy Canwisher, in collaboration with Josh McDermott and another author who probably did all the work, and shame on me for forgetting the name of the junior author who really probably deserves most of the credit, but they published an article just literally 2 weeks ago showing that there actually is a part of the auditory cortex that responds to music of any idiom and pretty much nothing but music. Now that doesn't mean that that's the only part of the brain that's active when you hear music, because obviously the rest of your auditory system has to register the sounds in the first place, and if music moves you, almost certainly some of the limbic emotional circuits are activated. But in answering the question, what makes music distinctive, to I think everyone's surprise, McDermott and Canwisher and the unsung hero found that there really is a part of the brain that responds to music and only to music. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're born with it,
no,
but it is highly specific. So everything from a drum solo to bagpipes to harps to a lullaby, that area is active, but not for other sounds like a crashing garbage can lid or speech or dropping your keys or slamming a car door or a siren and so on.
Is there any explanation of what causes a musical prodigy? Somebody like Mozart. I'm not talking about his work. I'm talking about the fact that at the age of 7, he understood music in a way that nobody in this room does.
Yeah, I don't think we have an explanation.
Shucks. Thought you could take a pill.
I mean, other than the fact that for any individual, any differences among people, the answer is always partly genetic, but not completely. That's the first law of behavioral genetics. All psychological traits are partly heritable.
I know a composer. he's what I would call a complete musician. He orchestrates everything. He, what shall I say? He exudes music the way we exude language. I mean, music is his language. He's also articulate and smart, but music, it's like he wakes up, it's music. He goes to bed, it's music. He eats, he breathes music. He inhales music. It's just remarkable to me.
Yeah. Well, and certainly for, any outsized accomplishment, any brilliance, genius, always also depends on immersion in the genre.
Oh, sure.
The 10,000 hours.
Of course,
and,
I understand.
So in addition to whatever inherited talent that starts you off.
Music is just, that's all it is an organization of sounds. I think speech is a form of music because, an organization of sounds. But that's all. I don't think of it as mysterious at all. And yet, it is only mysterious, you know what I mean? But it's just a phenomenon.
Yeah. I think I tend to think music is distinct from speech, although they're closely related. But they're distinct in the sense that when one of your characters breaks into song, everyone knows there's a transition. They stopped speaking, they started singing.
But if a wind machine started at the same time, they would know there was a transition also.
Well, and according to this new finding from Nancy Candlisher and Josh McDermott, the brain knows the difference. That is, the part of the brain that now these of course are not newborns. These are people who've been listening to music all their lives. I mean, just random people who volunteered for a brain scanning experiment. But there's a part of their brain that is activated when they hear music, any kind of music, and not activated when they hear a wind machine or speech. So there does seem to be something
there is
distinctive.
something.
Yeah. So I think the characterization that Stephen began with is
it's just defining something, defining an art it's hard to do.
Things that you discover this is a basic property of definitions, and it's a well-known philosophical literature on definitions. Most, unlike legal terms, terms for natural kinds, for things that you discover, generally don't have definitions. Just like, what's a definition of a giraffe? Well, you don't really define a giraffe. You study a giraffe and you characterize it. And your definition of a giraffe is whatever properties you discover giraffes to have. And so likewise with music. I mean, people who write dictionaries have to define the word, but as a phenomenon, you kind of study it and you have to, of course, be prepared to be surprised. That is, you might, growing up in the West, think that a definition of music is that it's tonal, that it's or diatonic, or that has a rhythm, and so on. And then you can be surprised by studying something that has all of the other characteristics of music in some other culture, but is not tonal.
I wonder how the OED defines. It'd be interesting to know how the OED defines music. I've never seen Twitter. I've never Twittered. I've never tweeted. I've never seen it, and I've never seen Facebook. So that's not actually true. I've actually seen Facebook, but I've never seen my supposed Facebook page or anything like that. And the reason I don't is I would get addicted. I'm only sorry, one of the reasons I'm sorry I was born as early as I was is I would love to have been a computer programmer, because math is my thing, what I love, and I would have been, but I was born, as we say, too late, and I know what would happen to me now is I would get completely distracted by Facebook and by Twitter and by all the social media. So the only solution for it is not to look at it. And I'm serious about that, because I'm an addict by nature, and that is one of the things I would get addicted to. I know.
I have a student came into my office and she said, "Wow, how do you have time to write so many books?"
Aha!
Then she looked at my bookshelf and said, "Wow, how do you have time to read so many books?" And she said, "I bet you're not on Facebook."
It's true.
Twitter is very easy. I do tweet, but that takes very little time.
Is it changing written language?
Yeah, I don't think so. And the reason is that we all write in different media and tailor our language for the medium, and always have. So when people wrote telegrams and they were charged by the word, and you had to leave out the prepositions and the articles,
10 words.
It did not change the English language, just because the way you write in a telegram, or nowadays the way you write in a tweet, isn't the way you would write a funeral eulogy or a review on Amazon or a review for the New York Times. And we just calibrate the formality and diction to the medium. And it's not even for people who don't have any written or literary output, you still don't speak to your family over the breakfast table the way you would if you were addressing a meeting around the table. You just know that there are different ways in which you speak in different formats, and we all command a variety of those.
And generally, with each show I write, there's one moment when, as I'm writing, I cry. And I sometimes try to analyze why that moment did it. Other times I know why. It's usually in terms of, it usually comes when a character who wants something desperately gets it verbally. Not necessarily gets what they want, but verbally something catches, and I cry for them because I can see them almost getting it. It's, I could give chapter and verse, but I'm not going to. Anyway, but so occasionally I do. But I often, however, get moved by what I read when the librettist writes a scene. I quite often get moved. When I get to work, it's work, and I can get into the character. But as I've said many times, what I do when I write for characters, I become the actor who plays the part. And just the way a good actor will examine the character he's going to play and really try to find nuances and reasons for this behavior, the reasons for the choosing of that word or that phrase or that emotion, I can get moved as if I were the character.
Yeah, I think this family of phenomena of onomatopoeia, phonetic symbolism, or phonesthesia involve a process in the brain that we don't really understand, where two patterns that have something in common at quite an abstract level manage to activate each other or resonate, maybe literally resonate in the sense of firing in the same rhythm in the brain for all we know. And that the brain runs on abstraction. It's not completely concrete, and that patterns that underlie disparate experiences can evoke each other, such as the contour of producing a sound with your vocal tract and the geometric features of something that you are seeing. A lot of metaphor in ordinary language and poetry relies on some kind of abstract similarity. If I dredge something out of memory, what does dredging in the sense of actually scooping mud out of the bottom of a river have to do with struggling to get a fact out of long-term memory? Well, I use the word, and none of you have to have the metaphor explained. The first time you hear it, you see what the commonality is. And it may be at an abstract level that there may be certain concepts that underlie, that are kind of a very deep language of thought that underlie very different kinds of experience, having to do with concepts like force, causation, substance, object, time, that intentionality or agency, that are almost like a Kantian framework for organizing experience, that is a deep level of meaning that ties together sound, motion, shape, experience, and so on. That's very speculative, but these phenomena, which I find fascinating, really call for an explanation we don't have yet.
Could there be a relationship between the sound of the word and the emotion? Famously, cellar door is supposed to be the two most beautiful words in the language. Well, you got the soft S and the L and that, and I wonder how much of that has to do with this, as opposed to, because we were talking about plosive words before, and how soft words evoke another kind of emotion because of the softness of sound, or is that?
I think they do, although I think the cellar door example has its own history.
Oh.
That, in fact, I was asked to contribute to a book by Louis Frumkes on what is your favorite word in the English language, and I think a dozen of the contributors said cellar door. And I don't really think it's all that euphonious.
No,
but I think
I don't either. But it's
it is a meme. It has sort of gotten out at some point. Someone and in fact someone tried to trace. I think it was the linguist Mark Liberman. Why is it that if you ask people what's the most beautiful word in the English language, a meaningless question, so many people have an answer, and the answer is always cellar door.
Well, it's because of what they heard.
It's because of what they heard.
But what's interesting about it is, as a visual image, it is of no interest whatsoever.
Yes.
But as
Not
a
at all.
sound,
And a sound,
to some people, no, not
Yeah,
to me, not
yeah.
you, but the cellar's pretty good. The door, I don't know.
yeah, what's the door doing there? But it is true. I do think, though, that there are these so, for example, a word like voluptuous. That is a word that, despite the fact that the relationship between sound and meaning is arbitrary, it's not 100% arbitrary. There is that voluptuous motion of the tips.
Right, but if voluptuous meant something entirely different, if it meant mechanical, I don't think it would be so voluptuous.
But there is
Because the minute you say a word, the meaning goes right in your head.
That is true. I mean, meanings do register automatically, which is why people get upset by swearing. You can always say, well, why not just ignore the offensive words? And the thing is, you really can't ignore them because they automatically register with their meaning in the brain. But there do seem to be, it doesn't seem to be completely arbitrary, even though you're right that particular words, like, say, for example, pulchritude is an example of a word that really does not denote what it means. I mean, it's a really ugly word for beauty.
Back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board. So there are words like pulchritude, but there do seem to be, at least sort of on average, some statistical patterns. There's also this very strange phenomenon of families of words that all refer to the same kind of thing and that sound alike, but not because of any onomatopoeic or phonesthetic association, but they just seem to glom together. So words for emission of light often begin with gl, glitter, gleam, glisten, glow, and so on. Words that have to do with the nose often begin with sn, snout, snippy, snooty, snot, sniff, snuffle.
Does that not refer to where the language began? Where the first, I know nothing about Anglo-Saxon and all that, but does that mean maybe that the first word was snout, and so all words relate?
So not literally in the sense of tracing it back historically. However, but you're right that the answer might be historical in the sense that when you have a new meaning, a meaning where you have to coin a word, and you have to pull out some sound, there's probably some temptation to use a sound that has some chance of reminding your listeners of the general semantic ballpark, and that can catch on, and then I think one word can inspire a similar word, which can inspire a similar word. So it probably doesn't go back to Indo-European or even
quite
earlier.
often those families of similar words are entirely different in another language.
Yeah, they are, right. So that's why those are cases where they're not arbitrary in the sense that they cluster together. And here's another one: cluster, clump, cling, things that hang together seem to be clo words.
There's a great word, cleave, which means both. It's what it means and the opposite.
Right, some of those called contronyms.
Is that what they call?
Yes,
well,
like
I know
or
contronym. Surprise.
To dust can either mean to put dust on, as in crop dusting, or to remove dust from. Sanction, there are a number of words like that, yeah.
Nice.
Our visual system and our senses in general respond to simultaneous or parallel motion. The Gestalt psychologists called it the law of common fate. So when you see a formation of geese overhead in a V, you can see it as a single, I described it as a V rather than 9 geese, and you see it as a unit. And if you're part of a group of people that stand up together, sit down together, do the wave, raise their hands, it feels like you're part of one big object rather than just you lose the sense that this is people moving coincidentally. And it is sensed to be a gestalt or a configuration, one massive body of which you are a mere part. And a second part of that illusion is that when you, there is what some psychologists call the illusion of conscious will. We have a sense that it's very clear when I reach for this glass, and of course I pick it up because I wanted to, and I will my arm to move in that direction. But in fact, if you will something and simultaneously it happens, you get the illusion that you willed it to happen. That's behind the party game where you have you put a smock over someone and someone else puts their arms under the smock, and if a third person gives commands, raise your arms, and the other person raises their arms, you feel like you're raising that person's arms. These are discovered by my colleague, my late colleague Daniel Wegner. But anyway, if you have a crowd where when you get up, everyone gets up. When you sway, everyone sways. When you chant, everyone chants. You have the illusion not just that you are part of a superorganism, but that your will has been submerged in everyone else's will, and that when you will people, the whole crowd to stand up, they do it in response to your intention.
You've just explained something to me. I had what I thought until this moment was the most remarkable experience. Many years ago, I went to a concert with a piece by Pauline Oliveros, and it was an audience participation. We were standing in a room. It was a stand-up type of downtown concert, and there's about 100 of us. And she said, "I want everybody to hum this note." We all went, She said, "Now, I want you to hum that note and then hum another note. You pick your own, and then go back to the first note, and then hum another note, and pick your own, and go back first." So we all started going, people doing it, And we did it for about 3 minutes. And without any instruction whatsoever, we all stopped at the same time. I've never gotten over that. And you've just explained it.